How's it going, everyone? Chef Alex Peña here. Wanted to come on here and talk about conchas today. So conchas are located, the recipe for the concha dough, the bizcocho dough, is located on chapter 4 of our book, The Mexican Bakery. So for those of you that have the book, that is the first recipe there. And it starts all the way in chapter 4 is where the recipes start. That first recipe is the bizcocho. So the bizcocho dough is a direct descendant of the French brioche, right? It's a very rich dough. So with that, it's about 24% sugar based on flour weight. So that's significantly high. It also contains a lot of butter and also eggs. So the eggs are going to weigh down the dough, making it so you need plenty of yeast. The yeast is the engine of any yeast-raised dough. You need plenty of yeast to help the dough rise. So with that, as the yeast is consuming the sugars, it creates that carbon dioxide that causes the dough to rise. But before you get there, you need to activate the yeast, right? So there's a couple of different types of yeast that you're going to find on the supermarket shelf here in North America. The first one is instant yeast, which is what I highly recommend. So instant yeast has different names. And then there's also active dry yeast. So active dry yeast needs to be activated. You need to add that yeast to warm water and create a slurry. You let it sit for a while, and then once you see it bubbling, then that's an indication that the yeast is not only still good, right, it's still alive, but it's ready to be used. At that point, it's thriving, right? So the yeast that I recommend is the instant yeast, and the reason being is because that instant yeast can go directly into your flour and you can instantly use it. Hence the name instant yeast, right? However, if you dive a little deeper, for those of you that are going to mass produce these conchas, right? Again, this recipe book is designed not only for the home baker, for someone that's scaling the product using the volume measurement or imperial measurements, right? Cups and teaspoons. We're also dabbling in a metric system, right? With the kilos and the grams. But we go even further, and we take this into baker's percent. So baker's percent, where these recipes are designed for somebody on the industrial side or even on the R&D side, where you're weighing the ingredients based on flour weight, right? Or you're measuring the ingredients based on flour weight. So in the case of the concha, in this particular recipe in my book, it's really high in sugar. So it's about 24% sugar based on flour weight, right? It also contains over 20% on the butter and about 20% on the egg as well. So that's a very heavy dough. It's a very rich dough. It's not a bad thing. It just needs a strong engine to help that dough formulate its ingredients and bring everything together and make it work, basically. So with that, you got to keep that in mind. So these recipes are designed for a high level of yeast, for that matter, right? Our yeast content is typically about 2.8% based on flour weight. So for 500 grams of flour, we're using about 21 grams of instant yeast, right? With that, again, there's two different types of instant dry yeast. You could probably find the second one there on Amazon. So that is a gold strain, right? So typically the one you find at the supermarket is a red strain. Not necessarily the color of the yeast, but the way it's categorized from the yeast manufacturers is there's a red strain and a gold strain, right? So the one you find at the supermarket is a red strain that's designed for lower sugar doughs that contain 6% or less sugar, where the gold strain is designed for doughs that contains 6% or more sugar. So for those of you that are producing this product from a mass production standpoint, and you want to make sure that you expedite that proofing and you control that, I recommend a gold strain of yeast, which is also considered an osmotolerant yeast because this dough is so heavy. You need something to really strengthen that activity, right? And that gold yeast is designed for the higher sugar doughs. So with that, that's enough about yeast. The process here to mix this bizcocho dough is very simple. The only key things that you got to really look at now is once you add those liquids to your bowl, you start adding your flour, You incorporate those ingredients. At that point, you're somewhat creating a gluten matrix, right? So flour contains a couple of proteins, gluten and gliadin. You add friction and heat to those proteins and you create what we know as gluten, right? That gluten matrix is what traps the gases in that dough as it rises, right? You got to make sure that gluten matrix is well formed. So, and before you can add your butter, you want to make sure that that gluten matrix is somewhat developed. Otherwise, it's going to take a lot longer for you to mix that dough together. So keep those steps in mind. And also now the final step there is once you have that dough hook, you want to make sure that you continue to mix that dough until it's fully developed. You're looking for that window pane. You're also looking for dough temperature. So dough temperature anywhere between 85 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a good space, right, for this high sugar dough, especially if you're using the instant yeast. And then of course that window pane is an indication that you've developed that gluten matrix that's going to trap those gases. So what's happening there? The yeast is consuming the sugars. As it consumes sugars, it creates carbon dioxide and it causes your dough to rise. So you want to make sure that that gluten matrix is well developed so it can trap those gases as the dough rises. So you have different options as well. You can overnight your dough or you can work it direct at that point. So with that, I'm excited to share that. That's in chapter 4 here in our book. So again, guys, if you guys are interested in purchasing the book, it's available on bakingevolution.com. There's a lot more information. This is only the beginning. Again, this is the first recipe in the book with a total of 50 recipes, about 333 pages, a whole bunch of pictures. We even have some QR codes that are going to elaborate and take you into different videos where we're talking shop and taking you into different master classes. So again, guys, thank you for your time today. Thank you for the support and happy baking. Cheers.